can we agree that the American voters, the American electorate, the American people gave Donald Trump a mandate to do what he needs to do?
Absolutely.
All this nonsense about whether it's going to be a close election or not, that we can throw that out the window. I think the people have said, Trump, go clean stuff up. Kash Patel represents not that I don't think Trump brought in Kash Patel because he's looking for an investigative, I don't know, hierarchy, a person who's very good and will dig up some Russian collusion information on Biden or Hillary. I believe that Trump brought him in to do what he said he was going to do. He was going to tear down, he's going to disrupt, and he's going to rebuild in the vision of what he wants. And in FBI, first of all, Department of Justice oversees the FBI. He's got Pam Bondi up here. He's got Kash Patel here. Kash Patel said he was going to gut the FBI. He was going to make the J. Edgar Hoover building on Constitutional Avenue a museum. And Trump wants to hear that. And I think that's an important thing.
But isn't there some role that the Senate still plays, right? I mean, I agree with you. Donald Trump ought to be able to have the cabinet he wants generally. But that doesn't mean when he appoints a guy like Matt Gaetz that the Senate should just lie down. No, the Senate made it clear, no, this is too far. I think Kash Patel falls into that category too, that this is simply too far. This is a guy who has been talking about QAnon conspiracy theories. This is a guy who has been talking only about destroying the FBI and not actually about how it's going to function moving forward. That's not the guy you want in that role.
Well, let me take issue with the premise of that comment. It said that the Senate said enough is enough with Matt Gaetz. I've said this, and I'll continue to say this. Every single appointee or nominee that Trump puts forward to a Senate hearing will get through. And here's why I'm saying that. These senators are equally as, let's call them, greedy and self-centered as everyone else who's elected in D.C. Let's face it, politicians aren't your friends. They don't have a lot of character. So if the Senate is split into 3 sections, every 6 years, your term is up, but it's staggered, two, and two, right, so that no one election has an overabundance of senators coming up for re-election. So the next 2 cycles, Trump will be president. These people don't want to get in front of the Trump buzzsaw because he will take their legs out and get them out. We've seen him do it, and he'll do it again. And the third tranche is the people who just got elected, likely because of Trump. I don't think there's including Lindsey Graham, who keeps saying, oh, I'm not so sure about Kash Patel. These people do this for the attention. These people do this so they get booked on Fox and NewsNation so they can talk about why they would say they would step in front of it. And you know what, Dan? To a person, including Pete Hegseth, who Joni Ernst has said, I have a problem with, I guarantee they all fall in line to vote for these folks.
Well, we'll see. I mean, look, that may be, and you would probably have a better insight into that than me. I find that hard to believe that there's going to be no role that the Senate is going to play, and they're just going to roll over no matter who he chooses, no matter how sort of off the grid that person is. And again, I think it's important for me to point out, I don't think that the majority of the people he's appointed are off the grid. There's a handful of them, and I do think in those cases the Senate should play a role. But what do you make more broadly about my comment about the Durham report? The bottom line is, this guy investigated this. Kash Patel wants to reinvestigate this again. And the DOJ investigated this. And the Senate bipartisan committee led by Republicans investigated this. We need another investigation of this?
You know, we probably don't. I think you're right. It was. But again, Bill Barr was no friend of Trump, and they don't get along very well right now.
By the end.
And Bill Barr appointed the special counsel, John Durham. You know, in the aftermath of all of that, Dan, you had a list of 51 highly littered with FBI officials, top-level FBI operatives and managers and CIA, who said that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian.
What does that have to do with anything? Well, these are former intel people who made a comment about Hunter Biden in 2016. What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
They were wrong because the president he literally just said that he didn't do anything. He pardoned his own son for the things that were on that laptop. My point is that the FBI, the CIA, is perceived by Trump and MAGA as being corrupt. They've been corrupted. They've been politicized. Whether it's true or not, the perception is they've been politicized. And the people who support Trump say, well, clean it up, right, Trump. clean it up however you're going to do it. And Trump picks the people.
But you can
who are
clean it
hiding
up.
MAGA.
But can't you clean it up, Eric, without Kash Patel? I mean, it seems to me like there's a lot of people out there who could go in there and who are, MAGA loyalists, who are, very right-leaning, who aren't Kash Patel, right? I mean, the standard for me is not, is the person qualified? That's too squishy. Anyone can say, oh, this person in any administration didn't have the right experience. I don't know what that means. I do know what disqualifying means, right? When someone has disqualified themselves, and it feels to me like Kash Patel has reached that level.
Yeah, so I don't agree with that. I think Kash is there for a reason. Kash is going to do what he said he was going to do. He's going to gut the ranks of the FBI and rebuild it in the vision that Trump wants. And again, the American people have kind of sent him that mandate to do it. Listen, with the Department of Defense pick and some of the other picks, I'm not defending whether they should be picked. I will say that I think they will get through. I'm not saying that they should.
I understand.
But I mean, Kash, I think Kash should be. I think this is one where everyone's going crazy freaking about Kash Patel, but he is there to do a job to clean up. Oh. We can't forget that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page using FBI communications to say we're not going to let Trump become president. It's just the dirt. It feels like it's dirty, and the American people want to clean.
Eric Bolling, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Last question. A lot of former Fox people now have been chosen to be in this administration. If there's one where you would say to Donald Trump, come on, man, you're crazy. Don't pick this guy or this woman who was one of your Fox colleagues. Might there be one?
Not really. Again, and again, I have no iron in this fire whatsoever. Again, the mandate for me, and I agree with this, is Trump he's a once in a lifetime politician, once in a lifetime human being, and the American public has said, go do what you want to do, clean the place up. We were fed so much BS, Dan, about how we need to be more inclusive in gay parades. There's so many things that the general public said, no, Trump represents common sense for us. Whatever it takes to get it done. I am not a Trump sycophant. I disagree with a couple of his policies. It's not that. I just think he's earned the right to put his people in place.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.